So we've always raised capital, Siddharth, very conservatively. Given we are, and you would know this about brand building in personal care space is it's high gross margin business, right? If your brand premium can attract good prices, you have a big cushion to play with. So you don't need a lot of money. So you see consumer brands in India, when they cross 150, 200 crores, they are mostly profitable. Many of them are profitable from the day one. So my belief was always that we should never raise money to buy revenues. We should always raise money to build brands.
This is Siddharth Alwalia. Welcome to the 100x Entrepreneur Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Prime Venture Partners, an early stage VC fund led by Amit Somani, Shripati Acharya, and Sanjay Swami. Prime is often the first institutional investor in category creating tech startups in fintech, SaaS, healthcare, and education such as EasyTap, MyGate, and SignUp. To know more about Prime, visit primevp.in. Today I have with me Shantanu Deshpande, founder of Bombay Shaving Company. Shantanu, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Siddharth. My pleasure to be here.
Shantanu, before we dive into Bombay Shaving Company and what a cult that you have built, right, for the Indian shaving, both men and women now, right? I want to know about your journey pre Bombay Shaving Company, right? About your parents, where you grew up.
Sure. So I actually, my parents come from the city of Indore. When they got married, they moved to the US, and my dad was part of TCS. So he was actually in the 80s. He was the person who was part of the teams that set up the US offices for TCS, and that's where I was born. I was in fact born in the US, and I stayed there for a few years till my fifth standard, and moved around cities. And my most recent memory of the US, of course, is growing up in Florida, where I did my primary school. And came back to India, I think 96, 97, when I was 9 years old. My parents decided that it was time for us to come back. They didn't want me and my younger brother to grow up in the US. Plus, both my grandfathers were no more, and my grandmoms were getting older. So my parents made the counterintuitive decision at the time to come back to India, which is what a lot of their friends did not do. My brother and I were obviously quite against coming back, because whenever we would come back for summer vacations or Diwali, we would be the cousins from the US with strange clothes and strange accents and all that, right? So coming back to India permanently was not a decision at the time I was honestly fully concurrent with. But kids are adaptable. Moved to Pune after short few months stints in Bangalore and Trivandrum. My dad was then the CEO at Tech Mahindra, which at that time was a very small company within the Mahindra group. So he took over as the managing director and CEO, and kind of grew it over the next 7 8 years. And he left a year before the IPO. And he in 2004 started his own company called Airtight Networks, which is in the Wi-Fi security space. He was 50 years old. So I was at that time a young teenager, and I saw my father and his co-founder, who was a professor of computer science at IIT Kanpur, kind of build a company out literally from our garage, and hire their first employees, whiteboard the initial plan, raise money out of Silicon Valley. They had their engineering team was in Pune, and their head office was in the Valley. And over a 15, 16 years, they kind of built up to 1,000 plus employees. I think 10 plus offices globally, 800 global clients, and they sold the business to Arista Networks in 2019. So I saw my father kind of do that, and it was a big part of the reason why I decided to become an entrepreneur. My mother, on the other hand, like a lot of mothers of that generation, took the professional backseat, and unfortunately kind of paid all of our attention to the children. And my brother and I kind of continue to carry the guilt, because between my mom and dad, she's clearly the more enterprising and talented one. Even though my dad has kind of gotten the more public accolades for being a CEO and a founder and all that. But my mom thankfully has converted her hobbies into passions and passions into professions. So today she's a yoga instructor, certified yoga instructor, and one of the best practitioners of yoga. She's a classical music singer, student, teacher, performer, and does a lot of cool things of that nature.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
moving forward, right? Where did your graduation from?
yeah. So I was in Pune. We came to Pune in '97. Did my schooling from there. Did my engineering from NIT Nagpur, MBA from IIM Lucknow. So for 6 years back to back, I was in hostel, which was again character building and beautiful. But for me personally, I tried to get into IIT, ended up at NIT. I tried to get into IIM Ahmedabad, ended up at IIM Lucknow. So both great institutes, but places which were not top. You know what I'm saying? I always felt that I punched below my weight a little bit. But from IIM Lucknow, I made it to McKinsey and Company, which was the number one recruiter on all campuses. So for 5 years, I was at McKinsey, and it was the most incredible professional first step one can make. I found incredible bosses and mentors. 25 of them invested in Bombay Shaving Company when I left. If there was a job that was made for me, it was consulting, right? Rapid problem solving, advising at the very top, changing of problem statement every 5 6 months. I served insurance, cement, heavy engineering, zinc mines, agricultural and chemical providers. I served the whole spectrum across a variety of problems. So for me, McKinsey was character building in so many ways, and I think a lot of who I am today, I attribute to my time at the firm. But 2016, I decided that it's time to leave and start up on my own.
And why did you leave like McKinsey at that point in time? You were an engagement manager, I believe, right?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
on your way track to a partnership.
Yes, yes. So in fact, this was a time where partnership discussions had started happening. Right, when you become a senior manager, I was doing extremely well. I was one of the top consultants in my cohort. I had tremendous support. I had multiple clients who I could build into a partnership platform. The two, three triggers that happened. One was, I think, 2015, 2016 was an incredible time for the startup ecosystem, right? There were a lot of things happening outside the firm. And when you're an advisor for a long time, you start missing action. You know what I'm saying? You kind of miss being at the forefront. And that started happening to me. Second thing is people who I respected tremendously at the firm started leaving for the startup ecosystem. So Rahul and Sid, who were 2 3 years my senior, went on to found Trebo Hotels. Saikiran Krishnamurthy left for Flipkart. Anant left for Myntra. So there were senior people at the firm, slightly senior people who were my mentors who had left, and it made me feel that I will miss out if I don't do this. I always felt, and even today, I can go back to McKinsey whenever I want, just because of the goodwill and we have stayed in touch, right? I recruit for them. I'm a faculty at their trainings. I continue to kind of stay close to the partnership because they're investors with us. And McKinsey will always be home. But I felt like I wanted to do something more. So that was one trigger that people were leaving. I think the second trigger was a conversation with a few friends. Like one of my close friends was a brand manager at Axe. Another close friend was an MBA at Wharton who had interned at Dollar Shave Club. So there were these three, four, input people who were telling me that consumer products in India, D2C, e-commerce infrastructure, ability to market through digital is going to go through the roof. So great opportunity to build a brand. And I was always a FMCG guy. Even at on campus, I wanted to do Unilever, Procter, Colgate. That was my dream job. And you know how it is at Indian institutes, right? The first company that comes, if you get a job, then you're not allowed to do what you really want to do. So it was one of those latent needs. So those three, four things came together, and I said, okay, it was a very difficult choice, Siddharth, to be very honest. To leave McKinsey it was like really, it took a toll on me emotionally and personally, because for the long when I was at McKinsey, like that was, I felt like my parents were really proud. So I have a younger brother who's a very high achiever. Okay, so he's an electrical engineer from IIT Bombay, a master's and PhD from Stanford, teaching at MIT, etc. Always a smarter amongst the both of us. Finally, when I was at McKinsey, I felt my parents felt that I had kind of reached Yash's level. So leaving was kind of leaving an elite job, great pay, but also leaving something which my parents were proud of, which I had been trying to do for a long time. But I just felt I had to follow my dreams.
And then how did you do the market research for what to start, right? Can you share, your
Yeah.
process of discovering consumer insights and how to bring them into action?
So I think the most rich source of information is always conversations with people who are in it all the time, right? So I had, like, my friend was a brand manager at Axe when they were getting rogered by Fog, and it was absolutely phenomenal. Every Friday evening or every other Friday evening, we would catch up in Chakala, go to a bar, and he would tell me all the things that are going going wrong with his work, and how a company, this is to 2015 or so, right? How Fog is kind of taking market share in the deodorant market. And I found that fascinating. I spoke to clients in retail, and they were telling me about how loyalty-driven categories are suddenly seeing consumers pick up new things because they're getting bored. Discovery is happening online. When I spoke to Saiki, who had gone to Flipkart, he was telling me about just the insane growth that is happening in across subcategories on Flipkart and also on Amazon. So I think overall there was a huge market which has now started becoming hungry for newer things. So there was that. The second thing I think was Siddharth was that I think it was finally time. One thing that I realized was it was finally time for a brand for men uh, to make them feel good. The time had come. Personal care industry is a 250-year-old industry. It has evolved because of women. Because socio-culturally, unfortunately, in the world and in India, the pressure of looking good is continuously on the woman, right? Her life, her future is, and brands have kind of propagated that a lot, right? And that's how it has been because if a woman looks good, then her chances of a good future are high because of education, lack of education, financial independence, etc. But if you see last 30, 40 years, right? Urban metros globally and even India, you're seeing women dating more. You're seeing women marrying later. You're seeing women being far more financially independent. Nowhere close to what it should be, but you're seeing it happen. Second thing you're seeing is people are life casting a lot, putting stuff on social media. They want to be right swiped all the time, right? In a matrimonially competitive environment with life casting continuously, men suddenly want to look good, have no idea how. Social conversation between women are very acceptable on personal care. You see a woman tell her girlfriend, I love your lip color, where did you get it?
Yeah.
What brand is that? I love your hair, where did you get it cut? Very, very normal, right? Between two sisters. But two guys like you and
We
if
never discuss.
like Sid, your shave is looking great. I would never do that. It's just socially not present. So the onus on the brand is a lot more, and the need is very high. So large market, huge opportunity for doing things in a disruptive manner because of e-commerce infrastructure and marketing digitally. And then the third thing was I think the time had come for a brand for men to look good, feel good, and not this macho beer pure ladki patao kind of brand. Not that. You needed a personal care brand for men for them to look good. So I think those are three, four kind of triggers that made me feel that this was the right thing to do.
And how did you arrive at the category that you need to create your own blades, your own razor, and
Yeah.
the set, right? Your own shaving cream.
The three, four options. That was very interesting. Three, four options were available at the time. When we narrowed down, ki boss, we want to build a personal care brand for men. There was, one option was if I were to paint the category then, right, there was shaving and there's non-shaving, equally divided, right? In shaving, you have hardware, which is razors, blades, trimmers. You have software, which is creams, balms, gels, foams, aftershaves, all of that, right? Again, equally split between these two. In non-shaving, 75% of the market is deodorants. And then 25% you have a long tail of face washes and creams and body lotions and so on. So that's how the market was growing. So three options we had. Option number one was pick a category which is comparatively cluttered but large and do something innovative in it and try to take some 5-7% of the market, which
Yeah.
is what, let's say take deodorant or take face washes and build out a brand, but you will always be like brand number 30 or brand number 100 or whatever, right? Option number two was create a subcategory of your own. So Fog did what I was just talking about, right? Fog went into deodorants, 200 brands, and did this whole don't waste any gas, only pure perfume
Yeah.
campaign. Darshan Bhai was brilliant at it and did it. The second option was we build our own category, like what Beardo did with beard category. Non-existent category, caught onto a trend and built out a assortment and portfolio of products and a brand. That so the category is small, but they have a large share of that category and they built it. And they're so that was
But
for
Beardo
me
had
both.
started when you were building, like.
Yeah, same time, same time. Man Company, Beardo, and Bombay Shaving Company have started broadly around the same
Okay.
time. And Beardo did very well. They grew very quickly. But that was option number two. I personally felt that for a young brand with limited capital, building a category was a tough and tall ask. So we said, okay, fine, let's get into a large market where there are strong incumbents like Gillette. Okay. But in that market, we can't do what Dollar Shave Club did, right? Which is in the US, a Gillette razor cartridge sells for $3.5. So Dollar Shave Club could come in at $1.5, $2 with 80% quality and build out a scalable business. India, a Mark III cartridge you get for $80, which is like $1.1. You can't beat them on price, right? So idea was, okay, if you can't play the razor and blade cartridge game, can we still enter in a large market like shaving, make really interesting, well-designed product, but very different? And the way we thought about it was, if Gillette is Reynolds ball pen, we want to create Waterman, right? More expensive, very exclusive, hard to get, but creates super premium equity. And for we built out this 100-gram razor. It's metal. It looks like a sword, and it's single blade. It's got Japanese blades in it. 2,000 rupees, 4,000 rupees for the whole kit. So very different. And as a founder, I always felt that if I'm making something beautiful, I don't care what it costs. Consumers will buy it, right? So obviously naive at the time, but it worked out for us because Bombay Shaving Company for 2 years only sold this one kit, and it created huge equity in the system because women were gifting it, men were finding it, everyone's name was written on the razor, so people really felt that the brand was very premium. And the interesting thing was that premium equity has continued to carry the brand forward, even though we are now launching very affordable and competitively priced products across categories, right? So I don't know whether it was the strategy was not that obvious, but today we are a premium yet affordable and competitively priced company in the shaving for men and women space. But that was how the initial thinking was.
Got it. And in a recent interview in Jan, I think it was with Financial Express, you said that you were just about to cross 100 CR in annual revenue. So I believe you would
Yeah.
have crossed it, right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So roughly, I assume, right, today you would be between 9 to 10 CR in monthly
Yes.
revenues, annualized
Absolutely.
to
Spot on.
120 CR. And you also shared an interesting fact that before pandemic, you were doing 3 CR in monthly
Yes.
revenue before like March 2020. Like, how did this like 3x growth happen in a period when everybody was, scared, panicky?
Yeah. That is amazing. So the pandemic was tragic for India, as we've lost so many people like close to me also. But from a business standpoint, it is actually created tailwinds for us to that. So two things happened, right? One is I think uh, people just came online, and for when people are coming online, our discoverability online just because of our skills in D2C, our ability to experiment, market well. It's easier for me to compete with Gillette and Nivea on Amazon or on Google as opposed to in 2 million stores, right? So that is one thing that happened. Second thing is demand did not come down for our category. Right, you and I are on a call right now. So
Yeah.
right now, what I'm wearing, what shoes I'm wearing, what belt I have, what perfume I have, it doesn't matter. But my face needs to look good,
Yes.
right? So consumption of our category continued to grow online. The third thing that happened was we launched women, which was a master stroke. Not It was not done by me or the senior people in the company. It was actually done by the women in our company. We have a large number of women who were extremely frustrated that they could not go to salons to get waxed and all because of the pandemic. That they were working in a company that actually makes razors for a living and didn't have a razor for them. So 30 women got together, created a petition, and said, we're going to design our own razor. We're going to launch a Bombay Shaving Company razor for women. So it was a project by the women, by the way. Okay. They tested it on themselves. They worked with the product development team. They worked with our procurement team. They worked with our industrial designers, got that razor out. And over the last 1 year, I said that category has just ballooned for us. It's now 25% of our business. And I think over the next 1 year will be 40 to 50% of our business will be women.
Wow.
Very different, right? Much larger markets, very service oriented given waxing, but younger women love shaving. They just love it. They like carrying a razor in their purse. They don't want the inconvenience of figuring out कब appointment लेना है urban company का या किसी salon auntie का. I want to go to a party. I want to go to a date tonight. I want to wear something short, carry a razor in the purse. So, and there is, unlike men, where Gillette is so strong, in women there is nobody. So there is a huge opportunity for us. Plus, given that women like Bombay Shaving Company, we are a brand that's soft, caring, easy to gift, right? So there is equity in a woman's mind. 27% of our buyers, even before our women's launch, were women. They would buy it for gifting during Valentine's Day, Father's Day, Rakhi, etc. Right? So there was a comfort to the brand. So when we said, okay, fine, we stand for shaving, and here's something for women, they were lapping it up. We launched a product. Within 6 days, it was number one on Flipkart. It was taking share on Nykaa. So that was over the 9 months. It has now become 25% of our business, growing super fast. So these are 2-3 things that kind of led to this 3x growth.
And if you can share, right, what's your percentage of revenues, let's say from direct to consumer, your own website, from e-commerce and offline?
So direct to consumer is roughly 10 to 15%. We don't use direct to consumer as a sales channel as much because we've realized one thing, said right. Men's shaving and men's personal care is not a very engaging category. It's not like men will think extra about it, unlike women, and kind of go to a website and buy something specifically. It's not going to happen. We get a lot of people who come and browse, and then when they see it in a store or when they see it on Amazon, they'll pick it up. That's the nature of the category. Women is very different. Women D2C is much higher. So 10 to 15% is D2C. Roughly 50 to 55%. Yeah, 55% now is e-commerce, which includes Amazon is obviously the highest one there. But we are growing very quickly on Flipkart, Nykaa because of women, Myntra is doing well for us. Social commerce, e-pharmacy, e-grocery. So anywhere and every channel will have its own assortment, right? For example, grocery will be more on shaving creams and foams. Nykaa will obviously be more on women's hair removal and so on. So that's around 55%. And roughly 30% is from our offline general trade, modern trade, B2B, that kind of stuff. So that's the split.
Got it. And if we can go back in time, right, when you started, right, 2015 was the year when
2016.
16 was
16
the
is when
year.
we started thinking about it, and so on. 2016 July is when we launched.
And when did you quit your job? Like put in
2015 end.
So 6 months was the roughly a period you took for product experimentation.
Experimentation, hiring an initial team, thinking about the market, raising some money, all of that stuff.
When did you raise your first money?
Yeah, my exit from McKinsey was kind of complicated, right? Because the firm invests in you for like 4-5 years, lets you kind of go around the world, fly, live in great hotels, do what you want. They're like, you have fun, correct, right? And but then at the 5-year point, they start thinking of you that as an investment, right? Okay, now you've kind of made all this investment in you, and you've done well. So now you start returning it back as a partner. So those discussions had just started happening for me a little bit at the firm. What my client platform is, what my knowledge platform is. And that's when I decided to leave. So my exit was kind of prolonged. I owed it to my mentors and the senior partnership at the firm to have conversations. I also felt that if there was merit in what they were saying, maybe I'm taking the wrong decision and maybe McKinsey is the place for me. So those conversations took like almost half a year, and I wanted to have them. And by the end of those conversations, like all the 20-25 conversations, right? Because over a period of 5 years, you work with a lot of people. They also kind of reach the same conclusion as we have to find. You go and live your dream. But by the way, because we are close and because you seem to be doing something interesting. And 2015, 2016 is when everyone decided to start becoming angel investors.
Yeah.
They all wrote checks in the company. So my exit from McKinsey and my fundraising of the seed round was the same set of conversations, which I cannot thank the firm enough and the partnership enough till date. So we raised around 4.5 crores. Someone put in 15 lakhs, someone put in 50 lakhs, someone put in 20, like stuff like that. So that's how it started.
Got it. And when was the time, right, that you brought in the first institutional investor, and who was that?
So we've always raised capital, Siddharth, very conservatively. Given and you would know this about brand building in personal care space, it's high gross margin business, right? If your brand premium can attract good prices, you have a big cushion to play with. So you don't need a lot of money. So if you see consumer brands in India, when they cross 150, 200 crores, they are mostly profitable. Many of them are profitable from the day one. So my belief was always that we should never raise money to buy revenues. We should always raise money to build brand, which is why you should always raise small amounts of money and not a large. So we raised 4 crores from our angels. Then we did a 2 million round with Fireside Ventures. Then we got in Colgate-Palmolive a year later. With 3
when was
million.
Fireside? Can you share the timelines of these?
2017 July. A year. Every year we have raised money. So first year was angels. Next year was Fireside Ventures. The year after that, August 2018 was Colgate-Palmolive.
Yeah.
December 2019 was Sixth Sense Venture Partners, and January 2021 was Reckitt Benckiser, again global. So we now have two global strategics who sit on Bombay Shaving Company's cap table, and I'm very proud of the fact that one small company in India can actually attract the strategic interest of $200 billion global behemoths. And we are all like in global investments. This is not the India team deciding to invest. This is the global HO that decided to invest in both cases.
Got it. And I think unlike in case of Marico, when they invested in Beardo, right, the eventual goal was to absorb the brand, right? Here, there are two brands, right? They can't absorb, right? Take half Bombay Shaving Company, half aap le lo, half of aap le lo.
So they can't. The idea is, so I've always been very careful about strategic investors, I think for two reasons. Number one is the institution is huge. Unlike venture capital or private equity, where the number of partners are very small, right? So continuity is easy. In large businesses, the number of stakeholders is very high. And if the person who's sponsoring your investment leaves, then the next person, you may or may not be important to that next person. So you have to insulate yourself from these kind of risks. Second is strategic investors are scary to financial investors. They exactly what you're saying, right? They seem like people who will gobble you up, right? So we wanted to do two things. We wanted to bring in these folks with a very clear long-term view. Number two is, and they're very strategically important to us. Huh? Like they're both highly penetrated brands in India offline. They will do things for us that we will never be able to do on our own. So their value to us is immense, but that value comes with a cost. So we said we will never allow, unless we are sure that we want to sell to this company long term, we will always keep them under 15, 16%. So both of them have minority holdings. The rights are very limited. So our financial investors have higher rights, our strategic investors have lower rights, and they're very mature, sophisticated, and comfortable about that fact. Second, the third thing is they counterbalance each other. So with Reckitt coming in, now there is a weight which
Yeah.
now it's easier to distribute, and the cap table becomes more balanced for a financial large company to come in if they want to participate in this.
And from 2016, can you share your yearly milestones? Like what were the numbers that you used to measure yourself by?
We obviously top line was a critical one. Our marketing to net sales was another one. Our cohorts and repeat rates were important. We moved around a lot, Sid, right? So we kind of went from men's shaving to men's grooming to like in men's grooming we had like a 500 SKUs, right? We had hair oils, we had beard, we had like you name it, soaps, body washes, we had all that. Now over the last 1.5 years, we've realized that okay, this is our core focus is hair removal. We know how to do hair removal for men. We know how to do hair removal for women. We now know also what channel product market fit is. So men's shaving is something that we will build offline more than we will build in e-commerce. The category sits offline. Right? Consumers buy the stuff in stores. Women's hair removal, the category sits online and offline both. Right? You will find it in Health and Glow, but you'll also find it on an Icon Myntra. So our strategy for these two different businesses is very different. And for us, revenue, marketing to net sales, NPS, cohort management. On online, we have obviously some metrics around conversions, number of sessions, brand strength, and so on. Offline, again, we have repeat cohorts for localized stores and so on. So it's very standard. We have kind of good part is we're working with companies like Colgate and Reckitt. You become very disciplined about how you track things. It's good.
Yeah. Yeah. And if from 2016, if you can share, yearly, let's say top line, how much? Uh,
Yeah, it's very hard. I'll tell you. I'll tell you what we were doing when we raised the money, right? So when Fireside invested in us, we were doing like 15 lakhs a month or 18 lakhs a month.
yeah.
Then 2018 when Colgate invested in us, we were doing like 40 lakhs a month. Then 19 when Six Sense and Colgate invested again in us, we were doing, my sense is roughly 2.25 crores a month. Then when Reckitt invested in January, again we were doing roughly 4.5 crores a month, and now we're doing 9 crores a month.
Wow. It's been a phenomenal journey for you. And where do you think you want to take it? Right? You have seen the
Yes, sir.
category evolve. You know the market size.
I think nobody owns hair removal the way we can in India. Right? You have Gillette for shaving, you have Nivea, you have VLCC and Kaya for women, you have Veet for hair removal cream, you have Venus in women's razors. No one brand owns hair removal for men and women in India as a FMCG company, right? I think that's the space we want to be in, and I think that's the space we can really compete and have equity. We are at 100 crores plus 120 crores. I feel that in the next 2 years we can build a 300 to 350 crore equal brand between men and women, right? And then at that point, the options open up significantly in terms of scaling to 1,000. I think to build a 1,000 crore business will require a combination of product and service business. So it might involve salons, it might involve clinical treatments, it might involve hair treatments with dermatologists. So I don't know what that journey is going to look like.
Yeah.
But I think if I were to divide, and for founders, and you have been one before, I think 2 year journey is sacrosanct. After that, it becomes, it's kind of more ideation. So my belief is long term, we want to own hair removal as a consumer product business in the country. I think men's shaving and hair removal plus women's hair removal together, offline and online respectively, can take us to 300, 350 crores equally divided between both. And then the 350 to 1,000 crore journey might involve, I think it might involve penetrating deeper in the Indian channel and expanding into services as well. So that's broadly how I look at it.
And just stepping back, right? This has been a phenomenal journey, right, as a D2C founder. So, but if you can lay some things right, some first principles right, when you acquired your first customers, right, what were those things which you?
Few things. I think number one is I think the product experience is crucial, right? And small things make a big difference. I think keeping it simple and focus on the small things is really important. For example, if you take a shaving cream, when you open the top of the shaving cream should not spread on the cap. It's a small thing, but it's very important. People in the ketchup industry understand as well. You see Heinz, they do a very good job of how their cap is designed. Second, when you close the cap, the sound the cap makes when it's closed is important. The tactile feedback on the thumb is important. The fact that you feel that the shaving cream is not getting wasted is important. The fragrance on your face after you wash off after a shave, how long it lasts is important. So, very important one thing which I tell to anyone who's building a brand, whether it's D2C or otherwise, is get the product experience right. Everyone can make a 95% good product. Few people can make a 99% good product. Very, very, very few people can make a 100% cool product. And those people succeed a lot. So founder energy, team energy should be in building out a really good, outstanding product experience. Second is I think figure out where to play. Like don't play in super niche, super small category. I think it becomes very boring. We did that, right? And we learned it the hard way. But don't play in places which are large. You have a much higher chance to succeed if the need is high, right? You build something small, it will not remain relevant for too long and you lose interest. So those are two things. Keep the product experience spot on. And second is play in large markets. Third thing is I think just learn the art of storytelling. Super important as a brand. You have to learn. And there are so many brands globally that are doing such cool things. There are so many media, like from podcasts to paid media to the internet opens up so many doors, right? Just learn the art of storytelling in your brand ecosystem. I mean, that's a very important thing that founders and marketers need to do today. So those are three things that I think are super important for people starting their own business.
And what was the story from the beginning for Bombay Shaving Company? Right, the one summarized in one sentence.
We believe that men need to look good. When men look good, they feel good, and when they feel good, they're the best version of themselves to the people they love. And that's our small role in the life of a man. That's what Bombay Shaving Company always stood for.
And some of the other gestures which you did right were, I think, important in the journey. Uh, uh, the fact that you gave your earlier angels a 20 cr exit in the last round, right?
Yeah.
So how did that happen, right? Because they would have liked to have stayed as much longer in the company, and emotional attachment is there.
So actually, what we did was, and this is a question that is not done. Thank you so much for asking this. Right, I think we don't discuss exits,
Yeah.
and we kind of think of them as taboo topics or whatever. Look, when you have a large cap table with large number of people, right, and people who care about the business, yes, they will stay for a long time. They feel like they're a part of the business. But when an investor wants to come in and wants to hold higher percentage of the company, and your return to shareholder value is satisfied for your angels, for example, you need to take a step back and say, if someone had put in X and is taking out 6X, do I need that 6X today in the company? No, right? I'm getting money from elsewhere. Can that investor, who's an angel investor, take that 6X and put it in six different entrepreneurs today who might need that money more? Absolutely. So what we did was, if someone had put in 20 lakh and was taking out a crore, we'd not let them take out a crore. We let them keep 40 in the company and take out 60.
Got
And
it.
that 60, we not force, but we encourage them that, I know that 60 is coming out, but please deploy it in founders. Write six checks of 10 lakhs each in six different founders. And you guys can do it together, or you can do it in employees of Bombay Shaving Company who are going to exit, and you can keep it parked for them as angel money. Our valuation is too high now. You can't put this money back in the company,
Yeah.
right? It won't make sense from an angel return standpoint. Take out the profit or some part of it and redeploy. That really set a chord with them. And I felt good because end of the day, I said, right, these are people who are my mentors, my family friends, etc. It felt like a loan, even though it was an equity investment, and I never owed them money as a liability. It felt like an emotional loan to give back. I took from my father-in-law, my dad, my neighbor who said, "Oh, if you are putting in your son, even I want to put." It plays on your shoulders. There's a
Yeah.
weight on your shoulders when you have that kind of capital. So I said, guys, if for nothing else, just do it because I'll feel lighter and I'll sleep better at night. Your investment in the company remains. It's not like I'm exiting you guys completely. So people took the money. They were very happy about it. We also gave significant exits to our senior employees who were in the company. People paid off home loans. People kind of bought their parents a house. Someone did bought a nice car. It feels good, man. Like we keep talking about wealth creation as entrepreneurs, right? It has to happen tangibly and on time. And the one thing I realized the most out of this whole situation was it was a small amount for the investor, also for the company also. But when you have a shark that has tasted blood, no, the hunger is very different.
Yeah.
And investors try to keep founders and early teams in poverty for longer. They feel that that person put in G-Jan for that. It's a bad idea because your burnout risk is high. You give the person some amount. You don't have to, like, the amount we liquidated must have been 5% of someone's holding
Yeah.
for employees, right? But that amount of money was so high that they said, yeah, if itne 2-3 साल में मेरा 5% has become this big, imagine what can happen in 10 years, and it becomes very real. So for us, secondaries are a very important part of our capitalization journey, and I urge founders who are listening to this, early teams, to do it. Do it in small amounts. Do it in ways where your investors are comfortable. Don't dilute a lot where your skin in the game reduces. That's a big no-no. But do taste blood because you're working hard for it.
And you plan to keep on doing it, right? Offering
Oh
it
yeah, 100%.
to your
100%. Even as
investors.
myself also, employees also, early investors, everyone. Keeping hungry is appetizers are important to stay hungry. So
Yeah.
I think that's the way to think about it.
Got it. And if you reflect back, in terms of other decision-making principles which your team has built, what would they be from which other D2C founders or any founders can learn from today's podcast?
I think one is uh, stay close to the consumer. If you're in FMCG, go into the market a lot. Talk to retailers, talk to category builders, talk to competition. Just keep. It's a very fast evolving market. Stay close to the market. You can't do work on a laptop in your office. You have to be in the market. You talk to people. It's tiring. In summers, it becomes very painful. You feel like you're not getting a lot. But Darshan Bhai is a fantastic example. He built Fog sitting in Panwadis and figuring out how the deodorants are sold. Right. That's where the insight came. So do that. Continuously stay close to the consumer. I think second thing is um, uh, trust your judgment and gut. Don't keep waiting for data to validate what you're thinking or feeling. Entrepreneurial teams are very fast and they need to be if they want to make big dents in categories which are have big large size competitors. You can't be too slow. And you can never be fast enough. So keep launching products if that's the way, or keep kind of banging down on our communication strategy to do whatever you can to up, create upheaval in the category as much as you can. And the only way to do it is to be agile. Third thing is in any decision, be prudent, right? One framework that I've found helpful is whether you're launching a product or doing a campaign or whatever, is to measure it across attractiveness, feasibility, and time to impact. So if you have two out of these three, it's a go. If you are questionable on even two, then kind of hold on. So that's a framework that we try to use for all our decisions internally, and it's something that's become a part of the DNA of the company as well. So again, one thing said is we're not doing rocket science, right?
Yeah.
CPG is not rocket science, but you have to do a few things and you have to do them very, very well. So that's what at least we try to focus on.
And how has your thinking on distribution evolved over a period of time, paid versus organic, right? When to push on
Uh,
paper and when to and what are the channels you as a founder discover for organic?
yeah, I think it's super critical to understand where the category sits, right? So we've realized men's shaving is a category that just sits offline. So our ability to create distribution offline is very important. So large relationship management efforts, working with procurement managers at large chains, making sure that our merchandising and in-store activations are extremely high quality. We are competing well. Our brand block is good. Our shelf flow is high. It's a pure brick and mortar business, right? But when it comes to women, I think it's super critical to understand engagement online, create brand pull through storytelling and community building, which allows people to come onto your brand destinations. I think organic traffic is a proxy for brand strength, right? If you have more organic traffic, then that means the brand is creating pull on its own. A lot of it is front loaded, so it becomes scary sometimes because you want to index on brand rather than performance. But I think performance is important because you continue to acquire consumers, you continue to I think what paid channels have done very well is that they have created a habit of addiction of marketing spend. If done well, the engine keeps churning, right? So they're important, but I think long-term vision should be on equity building for the brand and and bringing people into retail environments where conversion is maximized. So whether it's a big basket or whether it's a big bazaar store or whether it's a health and glow outlet or whether it's a large format departmental store in Kerala, whatever it might be. In that retail environment, your brand should be picked up, or at least should be top three consideration brand.
And how do you divide your teams for these distribution? If you can like roughly share the current size of Bombay Shaving Company and the size of the distribution team.
Yeah, so we have, if I were to think about it, right, we have two functions, core HO functions, which is marketing and product building. Right, so our marketing team involves performance, D2C, design. We have a production studio for all our product shoots, everything. So that's the marketing, the communication, campaign management, campaign strategy, shoots, all that happens there. Product is everything from consumer insights to procurement to manufacturer management to quality control to cash management. All that is happening. These are two big schedules. Then we have channel functions, right? And we have e-commerce. Within e-commerce, we obviously have different teams for Amazon, Flipkart, Myntra, Nykaa, etc. We have a D2C team which runs like a product team, right? It runs our website. So bringing in traffic and then converting traffic. Then we have a large offline team. We have a 65 member offline team, which manages both my modern trade, large format, and general trade, which includes pharmacies and so on as well. And we have a B2B institutional B2B team as well. So from a number of people standpoint, overall the company has roughly 150 people. Marketing will probably be a 15-18 member team. Product will probably be a 10-12 member team. E-commerce will probably be a 20-25 member team. D2C is a 8-10 member team. Offline sales is a 65 member team. Institutional B2B is 7-8 member team. And then you have obviously your finance, HR, those kind of roles as well, customer service and so on. So that's how the company goes.
And Shantanu, if you can share, right, as a founder, how you spend your time in various functions and what do you do for your own learning?
Yeah, so I'm a founder who likes to build a leadership team that makes my presence in most settings redundant, right? So we have a solid leadership team. Deepak Gupta, my COO, Samrit, who heads our marketing, Gaurav, who heads strategy for offline and new brands, Shanki Chauhan, who's our offline sales guy, Siddha, who's running our women's business, Maninder, who runs operations, Rohit, who runs product, who's the co-founder with me, and procurement. So this team is solid, right? They're completely independent. I can be hands off. The 2-3 things I try to do is, number one is I communicate, and over communicate our mandate and vision all the time. Second thing I try to do is I try to hire well. I always try to make sure that the DNA of the company is constantly evolving and not breaking. Third thing is I'm responsible for the financial prudence of the business. So whether it's raising capital or reviewing how the company is doing from a budget standpoint. Fourth thing I do is I make sure that we are honest to our consumer orientation. So staying close to the consumer, making sure our products are good, what the consumer is thinking about the brand at any time. I go into stores a lot. I read Amazon reviews a lot. A lot of my work is like dipstick and kind of out. I'm not a hands-on guy, so you will not see me in office, doing problem-solving sessions all the time with everyone. I will be very clear about what I expect to get done in a week, in a month, in a quarter. And then I trust my team to do it. And I make sure that course correction is my job. Financially, of course, I participate in raising capital and making sure that you're always on in the green on that.
And if you can share, we are reaching towards the conclusion of the podcast. How do you best derive value from your financial investors? So what value you derive from, let's say, Fireside and Sixth Sense, right? And how do you keep them aligned to that?
So financial investors are in my view, they are cheerleaders, right? They don't add like Colgate and Reckitt can add tangible impact to us, right? Colgate, for example, they make their tubes in a company called SL Propack, which is owned by the Z Group, right? We now work with SL Propack. All our tubes are made by SL, so that's a huge cost advantage. Distribution through Reckitt and Colgate will be huge for us. So financial investors cannot do that, right? What they do extremely well, both of them, is that they are very sharp problem solvers. They are very good at pattern recognition. They are they know me very well now personally to know when I'm making mistakes. They help us a lot with recruitment. I trust Nikhil, Kaval, Kanan, Nimisha's assessment on new people, especially senior folks. So they have played a big role in bringing in some of the people we have hired in recent times. And they keep us honest. Yeah, they are cheerleaders who keep us honest, and they I'm a big believer because I come from McKinsey. I'm a big believer in problem solving. You know, problem solving support continuously. I'm a big believer in advice. I think it changes the way you think. If you talk to someone very smart who questions a lot of your assumptions, who questions you hard to think more, that is invaluable. So they play that role
Awesome.
and
And
constantly. And the thing is, they want us to succeed, yeah, not only from a return for their own investment, right? I think they're both very founder first funds. They genuinely believe that if the founder is successful, their job is done. And I love that about them, which always makes me feel like they're in my corner. I've seen a lot of founders with funds where interests have become difficult, right, to manage, and it becomes it becomes very toxic, and you can't help it. Sometimes things just kind of go down that path. But thankfully for me, touchwood, I've never once felt that they were not in my corner. So that makes a huge difference, right? Plus, Nikhil, for example, is a consumer guru, yeah. Matlab, he makes bets that are totally unseen, yeah. Matlab, I'm amazed by his ability to like source out deals and find really crazy founders in corners of India and really kind of take them and build them into huge businesses. He's also had a career in public equity. So if and when a Bombay Shaving Company decides to go public, Nikhil would be a fantastic guy to just have in your corner. So that way they play a lot of value short term and long term both.
and what do you do? My last question is, what do you do for your own learning? You
Yeah,
read
so
books, podcasts, or whatever. What else?
yes, I'm a voracious consumer of content online, right? So I follow every startup person on Twitter. I read a lot online of what people do. I listen to a lot of startup podcasts. I have a lot of mentors, yeah, in my life. So Rahul Chaudhary at Tribo, Revant Bhatia at Mosaic Wellness. These are guys who I talk to like for hours, just kind of hearing how the ecosystem is changing, what are the things that are happening in their businesses, how they think about. So I think other founders play a big. Dhaval at PharmEasy is someone I problem solve a lot with in terms of building recruitment. So that ecosystem helps. I think I think founders who are like frogs in the well become stagnant from a learning standpoint. If you put yourself out there, you spend a lot of time with these people, and you meetings cannot have agendas. Like when I meet these guys, it's never about skill. Here are the three things I need to learn. Here are the five skills I need to pick up. It's never that. It's always continuous, and you discover more things about yourself along the way, and then it becomes really cool.
Thank you, Shantanu. It was a wonderful, wonderful chat. Personally, I learned a lot, right? And I hope you enjoyed, and listeners love it as much as I did.
No, Sid, you have a wonderful style, very unassuming, very open, and I've seen some of the work that you and Nancy do, and it's actually like it was very relaxing and a pleasure to talk to you, and just hear the intelligence in your questions, and when you make me think, that's always great, right? So thank you so much, and it was completely my pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much, Shantanu.